Here's what's coming up on today's show.
What are the tools that I have, and how do I appropriately use these things to get me where I need to be in the future for myself, for my family, for my children, those types of things.
Welcome to the How Money Works podcast with Craig and Jennifer Moser of Maestro Wealth Advisors, serving you throughout the Triad of North Carolina for more than 30 years.
All right, guys, so kind of talking about this here, when you guys are planning and strategizing for clients and potential clients come in, and I know, Cameron, you work with some younger folks, and Craig works with some older folks, and you guys work with people of all ages. How does this kind of factor into the conversation piece? Maybe you've got young children, or maybe you've got adult children. Either way, you guys want to kind of take this, but how do you advise people in these kinds of situations, like this one, for example? Families where mom and dad are on the verge of retirement, Craig, right? But the kids, maybe they still got a couple adult kids still on the payroll. Now, Cameron, I'm assuming you're not on the payroll.
No.
Nope. Personal payroll. You might be on the company payroll, but not on the personal payroll. But Craig, how do you guys work through that sometimes when somebody comes in and says, hey, we're getting close to retirement, but we're still paying for, car payments or cell phone bills or whatever?
It's very hard. I will tell you, we can say things, but if you're in the middle of it and you have a kid that's struggling, it's hard to push them away. I'm just going to tell you that I understand tough love and all that other stuff, but at the end of the day, that's your child. So you've got to figure out what you're going to do.
But you can't finance retirement, though.
No, you can't.
Right.
And so the issue is, how do you deal with it? Can you help them through this to move on to being self-sufficient? And then you also have to look at your numbers, because you can give the money that you have away to that child, incrementally, but can you survive it as a retiree? Think about this. Right now, if you're still working, you got a paycheck. I have to pay, guys, every time I say
you should probably explain this exactly.
I've got a basket right here. Yeah. Somebody called and said, you say gotta all the time. And I said, I do not. And sure enough. So there's a gotta bucket here. And every time I say gotta, I have to throw $1 in this stupid thing. I'm going to go broke with gotta.
Well, I think you've got about $6 in there just from that last 20 seconds.
Just the last two shows.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're saying, I'm working right now so I can fund this. I can handle it. But when you quit work, can your budget survive somebody else on the payroll, like you said, Mark?
Right.
So when you're looking at it and saying, all right, I'm going to do this financial plan with Moser and his group, and you get a plan together, you've got to be realistic and say, can I pay these things for an adult? On my payout.
And at some point it comes back to bite you.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
So looking forward and saying financial planning, doing a plan, and then being true to yourself and saying, I really can't do this if I'm going to pay these other bills.
Right.
And so I wish I had the clean answer for you on that, but it's a very difficult subject, because if people that you care about need money and you have it, you're inclined to try to help them. And I've got that.
Well, I imagine the black and white showing folks the numbers, hey, look, if you keep doing what you're doing, this is going to prevent you from being able to retire.
Right. At some point, you got to cut bait if you don't have the money to take care of the other side.
Correct. Right.
So I wish I had a great answer for that.
No, I mean, that's
really
the point,
don't.
though, right? Is talking through it. A lot of times conversation comes down to it. And if we're talking about future generations, Cameron, I'll kind of throw this one over at you. For people who come in and they're thinking about starting to put money away for either their own kids, right? So if you're working with somebody in their 30s, late 30s, early 40s, they've got small children, or even if you're working with older folks that are in and they want to help the grandkids when it comes to education costs. They made a lot of changes with the Secure Act 2.0 and 529 plans and things of that nature. What's conversation pieces there?
Yeah, so when you're planning for an early stage family, you've got your children that are younger, and you might not think about some of the things in the future that come into play, like the education costs, like you referenced.
Okay.
So you've got different vehicles to fund that. You've got a 529 account. You've also got a UTMA or UGMA account, which can be for minors in the future, that if you've got extra capital to invest towards them. But if you don't have kids, maybe you need to think about if you're planning to have kids.
Sure.
And the costs that come into play with that. So you don't think about it, but healthcare costs are pretty significant when you have little kids.
Right.
And I mean, hopefully it gets better and better over time, but you don't know. You don't know if your child's going to be healthy. You hope so. And then you probably need to make some of those plans, whether it be the college savings accounts, the 529s, UTMAs, UGMAs, and how that would impact your retirement in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Things that we use there, for example, if you have small kids, you have to think about, do I do a large deductible health insurance plan or not? So Cameron's here. He's a dink, dual income, no kids. So
I was like, that's not very nice.
Yeah. So anyway, he can have, he's got a high deductible health insurance. He's
Right.
packing money into a health savings account. Why? Because he can.
And they're great.
He's healthy and he can put that money in there. But if you have 3 or 4 kids and it seems like they're a plague factory that just happens all the time, and young kids especially, so you have to look at, do I have enough in medical costs that I have either subsidized through a health savings account or through some sort of flex spending account, or just drop the deductible down to where it's tolerable when you're doing that? Because children cost a lot of money. But as they grow up, as they get out of the house, yet again, that's a progressive plan that you would make. As far as the educational accounts, think about, he mentioned UTMA and UGMA. Those are after-tax savings accounts that have some tax benefits by using that child's tax rate for a certain amount of return. And then the beauty of it is, versus the 529 account, is that 529 is for college expenses only. If it's got a college ID on it number, you can probably pay for it with a 529. But if you think about and I'll just use the UTMA account for a minute, if you call that the Blue Jeans account, it makes sense. Why? Because now you are buying clothes, you are fixing the car. Maybe, Mom and Dad, I want to do the Cancun thing, and you say yes, that's the pool of money that you could use to pay for that, rather than pulling it out of pocket, because it's not coming out of the 529 without a tax problem.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So again, as you're building your focus for the future, you've got to say, what are the tools that I have, and how do I appropriately use these things to get me where I need to be in the future for myself, for my family, for my children, those types of things.
Craig, I got one here that's going to probably be pretty close to home for you as well. Aging parents and who are counting on their children to take care of them. Now, here's the question. Do they know it? Like, this was an interesting viewpoint. I saw somebody write an article from this standpoint the other day, and it was like, if your kids are your retirement plan, have you clued them in on that? And I think that's an important piece, right?
Or you just show up at the door.
Right. Because they might not be prepared for that
you got
either,
an extra bedroom, right?
Exactly. And I know you guys have dealt with that with Jen's mom and your parents and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Here's where the experiences that we have had. So Jennifer's mother had sold some farms, had plenty of money to come. She moved in with us. It was wonderful. At the very end of her life, she lived to 93, lived until September of last year. She became ill, had cancer. And so we had to bring home health care in. It was wonderful, but she had the assets to pay for that. So the question is, what if you don't? I mean, all of a sudden, I have a client. Their parents are in a full-fledged nursing home. Mother is, not parents, and they're burning out about $10,000, $11,000 a month. We are at the end of the rope on her financial wherewithal. She did not have long-term care insurance, and so we've been taking the money out of the accounts, and it's gone for a long time, and now she's at the end of it. And these children are wrestling with, what do I do? How do I continue to take care of my mother, whose body is great, but mine's not so hot, in a nursing home, and pay the bills? Because now they're probably either going to have to pay the bills, look to Medicaid, or find something in between those two solutions to work with. We recommended them to an elder care attorney to try to help them get to that position, because the money's just about gone, about a year. And so, that's a hard spot to be in. I look at my father, he's aging. I look at my aunt, who's never been married, so I'm kind of it. And so she just called me day before yesterday, has some rental properties. There's a pipe leaking. Guess who has to take care of that? Can you do that? If you were long distance, that would be tough. Luckily, I'm right here in town, and I grumble and moan, but I go do it.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? But it's a thing I have to do on top of the stuff I already have to do. And so you've got to make sure that you understand who's going to be there for you. and how they're going to step in. A lot of us let this thing go. I will tell you. When I do financial plans, one of the scenarios is what happens if long-term care happens? What happens? Because we're going to use a high rate of withdrawal for maybe 4 years there and pull that money out and say, does that put such a significant dent in your savings that either your spouse or your legacy plan falls apart? It's an important thing to look at. A lot of people look at it and say, yeah, but it probably won't happen to me. Folks, I'm telling you, it happens. If you live long enough, you will need some level of long-term care. It might be home health care.
I say they say, 7 out of every 10 or 2 out of every 3 people, right? So
it's a lot. And I really hadn't seen it until the last 3 years. I'll be frank with you. I do the planning for people. I show them. I offer them a long-term care solution. But I have become more sincere lately seeing the actual cost to different people and the impact that it has on their lives. How do I solve this potential problem? And so you have to think about that in very logical terms and say, if this happens to me, what do I do?
Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you have any questions about what we've discussed, remember, you can get a complimentary financial review with the team at Maestro Wealth Advisors by calling 336-448-1086 or go online to howmoneyworksradio.com for other great resources and ways to reach the team. You can also check the show notes of today's episode for our contact information as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the most popular apps. For Craig and Jennifer Moser, I'm Mark Killian. We'll talk to you next time on the How Money Works podcast.
Craig Moser is a financial advisor and certified financial planner. Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through Avantax Affiliated Insurance Agency.